Hello. So, welcome, if you're still with me, to my end of 2023 best reads video. It has been quite a year, as evidenced by my last video. Pretty much everybody that I know has gone through it this year. No one that I know has been able to catch a break in 2023, but I feel like I learned a lot of super important lessons that I wouldn't have been able to learn, for lack of a better word, in like a less hostile environment. This was truly the year of me, like, not to be dramatic, but like embracing my dark side. I think I've like finally started to let go of like the toxic glow up idea where it's like, you know, you start down here and you elevate yourself and elevate yourself and elevate yourself until you transcend and like just become the perfect, blameless, flawless version of yourself. I've kind of learned this year that healing is often unpleasant, and the next iteration of oneself is not always like on paper better than the last iteration of oneself, but that can still be forward movement. Sometimes the new version of yourself is less cool than the old version. So I don't know, that's kind of what I've been thinking about this year. I've also been thinking a lot about choices and opportunity, and how saying yes to one thing also inherently means saying no to another thing, and how there's just kind of like an inherent melancholy in that. Even if you are literally getting everything you want, you also, by way of getting everything you want, have to say goodbye to the other things that you didn't want. That whole concept has been giving me so much anxiety this year. I've just been like really coming to terms with my like negative traits, instead of like trying to force myself to be a different person who doesn't have those traits. I've just been kind of like coming to terms with them. And I think that part of this was that during a really, really traumatic and horrific time this year, my therapist started being verbally abusive to me. And so I literally had to like leave therapy when I needed it the most. And I think that in some ways that may have been a blessing in disguise, because it forced me to be put in charge of like my own healing, instead of just like constantly adopting like the therapist's takes on everything and the therapist's mentalities about what was best for me. So just like that's been kind of what's been going on in my mind. And yeah, I don't know. It's been a really, really bad year, if we're being totally honest, but I have kind of a sense that the bad things this year were necessary to things that will be coming in the next year. I don't know. I am a different, more hardened person. I don't feel like I am the same person who was like completely innocent and naive in the before of my life, but I don't like hate who I've become this year. So I don't know. We're harboring no delusions at the end of 2023. We are seeing things as they are. So let me know in the comments what you've been thinking about this year, if you've been dealing with any of the same stuff that I have been. I have read some truly fantastic, amazing books this year, and I can't wait to talk about them in this video. Grab a ginger beer or something alcoholic if you need it to get through the coming video. And yeah, let's just get started. I have 10 books that I'm going to talk about in this video. These have publication dates all over the place, so it's not just stuff published in 2023, it's specifically stuff that I've read in 2023. And I narrowed these down from all of the 5 stars that I have awarded so far this year. Other note is that I am currently, obviously I'm filming this before the end of 2023, and I'm currently reading Revolution in Rojava, and that is actually really, really fantastic so far, so it might not make this list even though it deserves it. So definitely check that one out if you have need of a hope for women book. Now, without further ado, in no particular order, let's just get into the list of books. So the first one that I'm going to mention is actually one that I don't have a physical copy of, and it is Laughing Feminism by Audrey Bilger. This was secondary scholarship that I had to read just for like some academic stuff that I was working on, and it has seriously been some of the most life-giving writing that I have read all this year. The very concept of laughing feminism is something that has really, really changed my own mindset and how I look at women's liberation. It has helped me to kind of shift my priorities a little bit in terms of like what I give my attention and what I think is needed. Specifically, Bilger's book talks about early women's authorship by Austen Edgeworth and Frances Burney, and talks about like the presence of feminist satire in their fiction. She does so while integrating it with then contemporary feminist ideas and just the idea of like feminism as like a joyful enterprise for women. I feel like, you know, in the modern day, we kind of focus on feminism as like we have to complain about everything and we need to focus on the ways that men torment us. But Bilger kind of frames it as like, you know, the real fight against patriarchy began with women laughing at it. And she has this wonderful scene where she describes a group of women reading Austen, and this was like described by somebody in a letter because they were too young at the time and they weren't allowed in the room with the other women. So it was Austen and a bunch of other women reading Austen. And she describes like how like their laughter could be heard outside of the room that they were in. So yeah, that has been an amazing book. Even if you are not an academic, I would recommend checking it out. I think that it's especially valuable for feminist academics and people who care about women's history. Next thing that I want to talk about. This is definitely by far the longest book on this list. This is Aztec by Gary Jennings. Definitely not a feminist book, to be sure. When I say that this book makes A Song of Ice and Fire look tame, I mean it. So Jennings, in order to write this book, literally lived in Mexico for 12 years. And let me just say, it really, really, really shows. Oh my God. This was so fantastic. It was so much more immersive than I thought it would be. When I received this book in the mail, I was kind of taken aback by how big it was, and I was really deterred from reading it because of its size. It's literally like 1,200 pages or something crazy like that. It read very, very quickly. It was something that I always looked forward to reading. I feel like Jennings does such a fantastic job incorporating ridiculous amounts of immersive elements. Information about other tribes that the main character interacts with, information about particular cultural practices, linguistic information, and all of his characters are pretty well like fleshed out, to be honest. I mean, it is like Game of Thrones level, like it's an epic, and there's so many different characters that they can't all be like super duper detailed. It's an epic and a triumph. Like, it's so, so good. There is a lot of violence and some scenes that are so disturbing, and specifically body horror elements that are so disturbing that I would really, really not recommend it for the faint of heart. If you are interested in getting a few more details about this book, I have a review of it up on my channel that I put up this summer, so you can just go look there. Super, super good. Highly recommend. Totally worth the page count. Next, I have a book that I actually haven't talked about yet on this channel. So this is Comfort Me with Apples by Ruth Rachel. This is a hidden gem if ever there was one. It's a food book, or a foodie book is probably a better way of describing it. And most of the chapters end with her own recipes. It's just like kind of a narrative of her life. It doesn't cover every single little thing because she has other books like this that similarly talk about different periods of her life. This one specifically talks about her adventures in becoming a food critic, all the people that she meets, all of the liaisons that she engages in, and all of the delicious, unspeakably luxurious food that she eats. She talks about opening a restaurant. She talks about living in, I think it was some kind of commune with all of her other revolutionary friends, and how they hated her for, becoming one of the elites and deciding to become a food critic. It's just so down to earth. It is so, so descriptive and immersive, and I guess that's maybe something that you will see in common with a lot of the books on this list. So if you are a person who likes to just have their mouth water while they're reading a book, I would highly, highly recommend this. If you are a pretentious food person like I am, which is so funny because I can't even cook. Victor is the one who cooks out of the pair of us. The next book that I'm going to tell you about is one that was a total surprise for me, and I resented it when I started it because I was just like, I feel like this is a book that I have to read. Oh, it's a classic. It's, probably going to be dry, and the last thing that I need is more dry reading. I should find some fluff instead. And oh my God, I think I have a new author to be obsessed with. And that author is Nabokov, because I read Lolita, and shock of shocks, I actually really, really loved it. I mean, this cover is repulsive, and it totally goes against what Nabokov would have wanted for the cover. And you can look that up. He basically was very, very against little girls specifically being on the cover of Lolita, because he didn't want the pedophilic tendencies of the main character to be fed into by the marketing of the book. And when every cover of Lolita has something like this on it, I had a really hard time believing from the outside that the book was truly as condemnatory towards pedophilia as other literary nerds say that it is. But truly, it is extremely condemnatory towards pedophilia, and I was reading this and I was like, I can't believe anyone could read this as pro-romancing a child and assaulting a child, because literally it's every other page, the author, Nabokov, is reminding us that Lolita is being preyed upon. She is frequently referred to as a doomed child or a traumatized child. The whole book, the tone, is what I would describe as pitch black humor. It is the darkest of the dark humor. I am obsessed with how the protagonist, or the main character, Humbert, all the time he feels this compulsion to remind the reader of how attractive he is, and he's like, now all of this was extremely disgusting and I know it, but I'm hot, so it could be worse. I promise I'm not one of those gross looking, it was funny. It was actually genuinely funny, while also making extremely clear to the reader that Dolores, who is Lolita, that the little girl, is being preyed upon. And there are some really stomach-churning scenes where it is so superb to me that Nabokov managed to seriously walk the line between the horror of the situation and actually find a way to make it into a dark humor thing. I thought that was superbly done. The writing in this is definitely some of the best writing that I have ever read in my entire life. I can't handle how good it is. I'm absolutely going to be reading more Nabokov as soon as I get the chance, so if you have recommendations, please leave them in the comments. I've heard Lolita described before as a patriarchal horror, and I actually kind of support that reading of it. I think it really truly is. It was made very explicit in this book how suburbia and how all kinds of institutions and patriarchy prey on and target and victimize young girls specifically, and enable people like Humbert to take advantage of those girls. I've never read anything by a male author that has been so incisive about patriarchy, while also acknowledging how insane like desire and like lust can make a person, while also laughing at it but also taking it dead seriously. He is walking like such a delicate line in this book. And so if you've been scared of this book and you're like me and you're coming in skeptical, you're not sure that you trust an author, for a male author from the 50s, to be able to do something like this, give it a shot, because I was so pleasantly surprised. Next, this is a very like common favorite book, but I have to mention it here in case you are out of the loop. If you haven't read Convenience Store Woman, you've just gotta. Like, it was absolutely such a joy to read. Weird woman fiction. What else is there to say about it? This is literally just about a woman who works at a convenience store and who really likes working at a convenience store. And she has this kind of very subtle creepiness to her. Like, just in these little throwaway lines, the author will be like, she thinks in just this flash of smothering like a friend of a friend's infant, and it's never acknowledged again for the rest of the book. She dates basically an incel for a while, but she kind of talks about him like he's an animal. And when she cooks for him, she like refers to the things that she cooks as like his feed. Delightful. Well, it is super short and sweet. You can totally read this in a day, and I can't recommend it enough. It's one of the most joyful books on this list today, so yeah. High Conflict by Amanda Ripley. So this book is basically about high conflict in politics, and Ripley's thesis is basically that there is productive conflict and then there is high conflict, where the conflict is so acute and so personal and so vitriolic that just nothing can come of it and nothing is getting done. So yeah, she basically, I mean, it says it all on the cover. She says, you know, why we get trapped in that kind of conflict, what leads to it, and how we get out of it. I found that this book gave me a lot of peace. It also gave me a lot to think about. I know, like, especially post Fall of Roe, I tend to get really trapped into high conflict a lot of the time, and Ripley gives pretty good reasoning to support the idea that if we're going to get anywhere and, you know, turn the country into a place where people want to live again and, you know, actually forward our political aims, then we have to take a different tactic than high conflict, because no one likes getting called names. There needs to be discussion and productive conflict, and there needs to be a certain amount of like neighborliness between people before conflict can actually be like worth something. Highly recommend this, especially if you are feeling overwhelmed by current political situations. This is an absolute must read for your sanity and also for the sanity of the people around you. Next, I have another book that I have done an individual video about on this channel already. This is I Await the Devil's Coming, or the story of Mary MacLane. This is a kind of autobiographical book written in April 1902. This book feels like it's haunted. If you want more details about it, you should totally go and watch the other video that I made about it, but it is haunting, and Miss MacLane has stayed with me since I read this. Very important for feminist consciousness, understanding that women all throughout history were truly individual, bright people, and that it's not just in the 21st century that women have started thinking for themselves. She has a very strong personality, the woman who wrote this, and she is kind of an egotistical creep. And that's why I love her, though. I also think she's an absolute genius, and she, if you'll read this, thinks that she is too. Next is something that I think is the only self-published book on this list. So the next book that I'm gonna recommend, this is 18 Months by Shannon Thrace. I was super excited a couple of weeks ago because I obviously reviewed this very positively on Goodreads, and I earned myself a follow from the author herself, which was extremely flattering because Thrace can like really write. So 18 Months is basically a memoir about the author's marriage. And specifically, it's a memoir of the author's marriage after her husband began identifying himself as trans. And what I've really appreciated about this book, and what I think makes this stand out so much, is that it manages to approach this controversial topic specifically from like a liberal and an inclusive standpoint. I feel like almost all books that are currently getting published by like traditional publishing agencies, it's got to be either, 100% validation and like, like no analysis allowed, like you have to just be validating of all things gender identity, or it's the flip side, which is it is super conservative and it's endorsed by Ben Shapiro. It's advocating for traditional gender roles or nothing. This was amazing because it like courts this controversial topic, but the author herself is extremely and obviously liberal and open-minded. She herself, the author, is attracted to both men and women, and she herself is very flexible when it comes to gender roles, gender performance, gender expression. And that made this book such a unique perspective. The story is told fantastically. She documents some pretty insane abuse that was inflicted onto her by her husband and all of the weird contradictory things that her husband kind of did to her, and like, the ways that he used ideas about gender identity and, like the front basically of like being trans as a way to further his abuse against her. She discusses this situation in a way that isn't like, oh, and it's all because he didn't want to act masculine enough. It's so personalized, and it avoids so many pitfalls that I see in other literature that talks about the same topic. Thrace herself is so immensely likable too. Like, she's totally the type of person that I would like love to get a beer with if I liked beer. She's like a hippie type, and she fixes computers and really involved in like the LGBT scene around her. Cool person. Very assertive. I really liked this. I think it's an extremely useful perspective. If you're curious, I would recommend checking it out because the writing is fantastic. I flew through this book. Yeah, the next thing that I want to recommend, and that I've chosen for this list, is another one that I've already talked about on this channel, so mostly I'm gonna just direct you to that video. This is Journey of the Pink Dolphins by Cy Montgomery. This book has no business being as amazingly literarily written as it is. What a gift to the pink Amazon dolphin. I think part of what I really appreciated about this is that it is about an animal that is not typically shown to be like glamorous. It's about an animal that is historically viewed as like kind of ugly. Cy Montgomery does such an amazing job of integrating local folklore and imagery and legends about these dolphins into this narrative, and kind of intertwining her own observations and like science and like what is known with myth and folklore, so that what results is an extremely poetic environmental, like, animals deserve to be protected because of their uniqueness, not necessarily because of their beauty. The Boto of myth is sexually promiscuous and preys on young maidens and takes them to an enchanted city under the river, lives in muddy water, and is not beautiful and sleek like a normal dolphin. Instead, it has this weird pinkish tone to its skin, and its body looks more like that of a human fetus than what we think of when we picture a dolphin. I don't know, reading about her adventures in the Amazon, studying these animals, it is so immersive and just so fantastic, and it really gave me a new appreciation for an animal that I otherwise thought very little about. I highly recommend this if you don't know a lot about pink dolphins and you are curious about them and the myths surrounding them. The last book was one of my most anticipated books of this year, and it did not disappoint. This is Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. If you like a really, really mean female character, then this is the book for you. I've heard this described as like American Psycho for women. I don't know if it's quite there because there's not enough violent details, but oh my god, it is so good. Just an overall very sharp and incisive book. I had a ton of fun with this. You should totally check it out. That is all the books that I'm going to recommend to you today. Here is the finished stack. I wholeheartedly recommend every single one of these. If any of these piqued your curiosity, please let me know in the comments. If you have any additional questions about any of them, I would be super happy to answer them. You can also refer to my Goodreads reviews if you are curious. Yeah, all of these books really deserve to be read. Some of these are books that I just don't see other people ever talking about. You know how we do it on this channel. I find shit that no one else is reading, and I tell you whether or not you should be. I feel like Barnes & Noble and other big bookstores have been becoming really ubiquitous in what they have to offer, and that's why I think that there is really real value in seeking out books that are lesser known and that you can't get at most bookstores, that have, you know, older publication dates, and giving those a try, because it can really expose you to more diverse perspectives and more interesting ideas, frankly, than you can get if you are always just going to Barnes & Noble for stuff. I really hope that you will give one or more of these books a chance. And yeah, I hope that everybody has been doing all right this year. Again, you already know I've been going through it this year, but I feel like I have also really gotten a lot stronger this year, and I can feel like my character is starting to really take shape and harden a little bit, and I am proud of myself for getting through what I've went through this year. I don't know. I hope that you're all having a good Christmas or a good winter holiday, whatever you celebrate. That's it. I guess I'll see you on the other side. I'm looking forward to 2024. We are almost at 500 subscribers, which is kind of exciting. Though, my god, I wish you guys talked to me more. Please follow me on Goodreads. Feel free to friend me if we have similar reading tastes. I mean, the worst I can do is just say no if you don't read stuff that I like. I don't know. I wish you all left me comments and chit-chatted with me more, because, I don't know, I feel like that would lead to a more holistic experience for all involved. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for joining if you are relatively new here. And yeah, I hope you have a really good new year and a good rest of your year. That's it from me. Bye.